Stupid. The word landed so softly that Khalid Mercer almost believed it was elegant, almost believed cruelty became harmless when wrapped in a tailored suit and spoken under gold light. But Naomi Carter heard it. So did the attorney beside him. So did the investors pretending to study the wine list. And for one cold second, the private dining room at the Meridian Room stopped breathing. A fork hovered above a plate of rosemary lamb. Ice shifted once inside a crystal glass. Somewhere beyond the tinted windows, Washington, D.C. glittered like it had no idea what had just happened 30 stories above Pennsylvania Avenue. Naomi stood beside the table with a silver tray balanced in one hand and a water pitcher in the other, her black uniform pressed, her name tag straight, her face calm in the way storms are calm before they decide what kind of damage the world has earned. Khalid did not look at her when he said it. Men like him rarely looked directly at the people they diminished. He looked past her, through her, around her, as if she were part of the furniture, something polished and silent, useful only when needed and invisible when not. He was 42, rich enough to bend rooms before he entered them, the Arab-American billionaire CEO of Mercer Global Capital, a man whose white skin, sharp jaw, and expensive restraint had become part of his legend. Magazines called him disciplined. Competitors called him dangerous. Employees called him sir even when he was not in the room. Tonight, he sat at the center of a $900 million negotiation, surrounded by lawyers, Gulf investors, private equity men, and the kind of people who smiled without showing mercy. Naomi Carter was not supposed to matter in that room. That was the first mistake. She was 27, a black waitress working her second shift of the day, moving between men who spoke in numbers larger than neighborhoods and laughed like consequences belonged to other people. Her shoes had been hurting for 2 hours. Her little sister's hospital bill was folded in the side pocket of her purse downstairs. Her rent was due Friday. And still, her hands were steady. That was something the wealthy rarely understood about people who survive hard lives. Steadiness is not weakness. Silence is not emptiness. A calm face does not mean a person has accepted her place. Khalid reached for his glass without thanking her. A thin bead of water had slipped from the pitcher and touched the corner of a document near his hand. Not enough to ruin anything. Not enough to stain the paper. Barely enough to notice. But men who worship control can turn even a drop of water into a throne. He leaned back, smiled with one side of his mouth, and said the word again, this time with a little more air behind it. Stupid. A few men lowered their eyes. One smiled because he thought power required participation. Naomi did not apologize. She did not tremble. She simply placed the pitcher down with care, the soft sound of glass meeting linen cutting cleaner than any argument could have. Across the table, Samir Al-Fayed, the senior partner from Dubai, watched her for the first time. Not as a server, not as background, as a witness. Khalid, enjoying the small cruelty, switched into Arabic and murmured something to Samir, assuming the language would protect him, assuming the room belonged to him, assuming Naomi Carter could carry water, but not meaning. He was wrong. She understood every word. The sentence Khalid murmured was not loud, but arrogance does not need volume when it believes the walls are loyal. He told Samir that people like Naomi were useful only when they stayed quiet, then gave a small laugh as if humiliation were a private joke paid for by the bottle. The men beside him smiled carefully. Not fully, not honestly, just enough to remain safe near money. That was how rooms like the Meridian Room worked. Everyone measured every reaction. Every blink had a price. Every silence protected somebody. The restaurant sat on the top floor of the Ashford Grand Hotel, high above the city, where black cars lined the entrance below and federal buildings glowed in the distance like monuments to rules powerful people often found ways around. Inside the private suite, the lighting was soft and intentional. Gold lamps washed over cream walls. White roses stood in tall glass vases. The carpet was so thick that footsteps disappeared before they could disturb anyone important. A long table stretched through the center of the room, dressed in linen so white it looked untouched by real life. At one end sat Khalid Mercer, calm, polished, and dangerous in the way polished things can be dangerous when they are sharp enough. At the other end sat Samir Al-Fayed, the Dubai investor whose family office was prepared to move $900 million before midnight. Between them sat attorneys, analysts, translators, and men whose watches cost more than Naomi made in a year. The deal was supposed to be simple. Mercer Global Capital would acquire a controlling interest in a renewable logistics company with operations across Texas, Georgia, and the Gulf Coast. Samir's fund would provide the capital. Khalid would provide the American network. The papers were already stacked in leather folders. The champagne had already been poured. The smiles had already been practiced. But beneath all that polish was something Naomi could feel without being told. Pressure. Not the honest kind that comes from hard work. The hidden kind. The kind that makes people laugh too quickly and touch documents too often. She had served enough private dinners to know when a room was celebrating and when a room was pretending to. Khalid kept glancing at Appendix C, the Arabic side agreement placed beneath the English packet. Samir's junior counsel kept reaching for it, then stopping whenever Khalid's attorney cleared his throat. Naomi noticed. She always noticed. That was another thing people underestimated about servers. They thought service meant absence. They forgot that the person refilling glasses hears the jokes, the threats, the whispers, the names, the numbers, the little cracks in the performance. Naomi had learned long ago that invisibility could be a cage, but it could also be a window. So she watched. She listened. She carried sparkling water past men who thought she was empty space. And when Khalid insulted her in Arabic, she did not answer yet. Not because she was afraid. Because she knew timing was the difference between noise and power. Naomi had learned Arabic in a classroom that smelled like dry markers, old carpet, and impossible hope. It was not some party trick. It was not a secret talent meant to impress rich men over imported wine. It was years of waking before sunrise, riding 2 buses across town, and repeating phrases under her breath while the rest of Washington, District of Columbia, was still rubbing sleep from its eyes. Her mother used to tell her that language was more than sound. It was a key. It could open doors people swore were locked. Naomi believed that once. She believed it so deeply that she built her whole future around it. At 21, she had been the top student in her Arabic studies program at Howard. Professors praised her ear. Visiting diplomats paused when she spoke. One instructor told her she had the rare kind of fluency that did not sound memorized. It sounded lived in. Naomi carried that sentence like a medal for years. She dreamed of embassy work, global negotiations, translation booths, quiet rooms where every word mattered, and where a black girl from Southeast Washington could sit between nations and make meaning move safely from one side of the table to the other. Then life did what life sometimes does. Her mother's health failed first. Then the bills came. Then Grace, her little sister, needed surgery, therapy, follow-up visits, medicine, rides, specialists, and a calm voice at the end of hard days. Dreams did not disappear all at once. They were pawned slowly. A textbook sold online. A fellowship declined. A final semester delayed. A government internship missed because no one else could take Grace to a hospital appointment. Naomi did not complain. She simply folded the dream into herself and went to work. The Meridian Room paid better than most restaurants because the tips were heavy and the guests were careless with cash when they wanted to feel generous. Some nights, Naomi made enough to cover groceries and a utility bill. Other nights, she made enough to remind herself that dignity and survival were often forced to share the same uniform. She became excellent at being unseen. She learned who preferred still water, who lied about allergies, who smiled at servers only when cameras were nearby, who used kindness like perfume and cruelty like a signature. She learned that wealthy people often spoke freely around staff because they believed uniforms erased intelligence. That belief had protected secrets in front of her for 3 years. Affairs of business, quiet betrayals, hidden clauses, men saying the honest part in languages they assumed no one nearby could understand. Naomi collected none of it for revenge. She was not hunting anyone. She was just listening because listening had once been her gift, and had become her way of surviving. So when Khalid Mercer leaned towards Samir and let Arabic roll out of his mouth like a locked door, Naomi did not freeze because she was confused. She froze because every buried part of her life had just opened its eyes. Khalid Mercer had built his reputation on rooms like this, rooms where soft carpets swallowed discomfort and expensive walls kept ordinary people from hearing extraordinary selfishness. He loved the shape of a negotiation table. He loved the way people leaned forward when he spoke, the way attorneys paused their pens, the way younger executives laughed half a second too late because they were waiting to learn whether he had made a joke or issued a warning. To the business press, he was a visionary, an Arab-American billionaire who had turned a failing logistics fund into Mercer Global Capital, a private empire with assets from Dallas warehouses to Miami data centers. His face appeared on magazine covers beside words like discipline, precision, and global influence. But magazines photograph posture, not character. They capture the suit, not the soul wearing it. Khalid understood markets. He understood leverage. He understood how to make a man feel lucky while quietly taking more than he gave. What he never understood was humility. He believed respect moved downward only after wealth approved it. He believed servers were scenery, assistants were shields, junior lawyers were tools, and anyone without power should be grateful just to stand near it. That belief had made him rich, but it had also made him careless. Careless men are the easiest to expose because they confuse fear with loyalty. Earlier that evening, before Naomi ever approached the table, Khalid had arrived through the private elevator with 2 security consultants, 3 phones, and no patience for anyone who could not help him close the deal. Evelyn Brooks, the restaurant manager, had greeted him with both hands folded and a smile so tight it looked painful. Khalid did not remember her name. He rarely remembered names unless they appeared on contracts. He had asked for still water at exactly 48 degrees, no lemon, no interruption, and no staff who looked nervous. Evelyn had nodded quickly, then warned every server in the back hallway that table 12 was not to be mishandled. Naomi had heard that phrase before. Mishandled. It always meant the guest mattered more than the person serving him. It meant swallow the insult, smile through the stare, protect the restaurant from the truth. Khalid had chosen the seat facing the door because powerful men like to watch who enters their world. He had placed Appendix C near his right hand, half covered by a menu, while his attorney, Martin Vale, kept tapping the leather folder with one finger. Samir Al-Fayed noticed the tapping. Naomi noticed Samir noticing. That was the first crack. Then came the second. Khalid's Arabic softened whenever he spoke to Samir, almost brotherly, almost warm, but his English sharpened whenever he spoke to staff. It was not an accent. It was not culture. It was choice. Naomi knew the difference. She had spent years studying not just words, but intention. And now, standing beside his chair with the water pitcher cooling in her hand, she heard Khalid say in Arabic that Samir would never catch the control clause until the transfer was complete. Naomi's face stayed still. Her pulse did not. The control clause was hidden where arrogant men always hide their sharpest tools. Not in the sentence everyone read, but in the sentence everyone assumed was harmless. Appendix C described the transfer of voting authority after 18 months if certain performance targets were missed. In English, it sounded routine. In Arabic, the wording was colder, narrower, and far more dangerous. It did not say the fund could review the transfer. It said the fund would be deemed to have accepted it unless a written objection was filed within 10 business days through a specific office in Delaware. 10 days. One office. One procedural door disguised as a formality. Naomi understood it immediately, and the realization moved through her like a bell struck underwater. Quiet. Deep. Impossible to ignore. Khalid kept smiling. Martin Vale kept tapping the folder. Samir Al-Fayed kept studying the faces around him, sensing something but not yet seeing the shape of it. Then Khalid made his mistake larger. He lifted his glass without looking at Naomi and said, "More water." Not please. Not her name. Just the command, dropped into the air like a coin thrown at the ground. Naomi reached for the pitcher. Her hand remained steady, but every muscle in her body had gone alert. She poured carefully. The stream was clean, clear, almost silent. Khalid watched the water rise in his glass, then glanced at the tiny damp mark near the bottom edge of his document as if it were a personal insult. "Careful," he said in English, loud enough for the table to hear. "Some of these papers are worth more than your whole shift." A small laugh moved down the table and died before it reached Samir. Evelyn Brooks, the manager, appeared near the door with panic in her eyes. She gave Naomi a look that begged her to disappear. That was the look service workers knew too well. The look that said, "Survive this quietly so everyone else can stay comfortable." Naomi gave no sign that she saw it. Khalid turned to Samir and returned to Arabic, his voice low and smooth. He said that the waitress was clearly too simple to handle a pitcher, much less understand a room full of real business. This time Martin Vale smiled into his napkin. This time one of the analysts looked down at his shoes. This time Samir did not smile at all. Naomi placed the pitcher back on the side station, folded her hands in front of her, and waited. The room continued moving, but differently now. The clink of silverware sounded cautious. The air conditioner hummed too loudly. Outside the windows, the lights of Washington spread in bright straight lines. Government buildings, office towers, avenues built for people who believed language could shape nations. Inside, one man had just used language to hide theft and insult the only person in the room who understood both. Khalid leaned back, pleased with himself, and asked in English whether anyone had final concerns before signing. Naomi looked at Appendix C. Then she looked at Samir. The moment had arrived, and it did not need to be loud. Naomi did not raise her hand. She did not step into the center of the room like someone begging for permission. She simply moved one foot closer to the table, close enough for her reflection to appear in the polished silver beside Khalid's glass, and spoke in Arabic so clean and measured that the room seemed to lose its balance. "Excuse me, Mr. Al-Fayed, but before you sign, you may want to read the second paragraph of Appendix C again. The Arabic wording does not match the English summary." The silence that followed was not empty. It was crowded with every assumption Khalid had made, and every one of them breaking at once. Samir's eyes lifted first. Martin Vale stopped tapping the folder. Evelyn Brooks froze near the door with one hand pressed lightly against her own clipboard. The analyst who had laughed lowered his glass as if it had suddenly become too heavy to hold. Khalid did not move. For half a second, his face remained arranged in the same confident expression, because men like him often need time to understand that the world has changed without asking them. Then his smile disappeared. Not dramatically, not all at once. It faded from the corners first, then from his eyes, until only the suit remained powerful. "You speak Arabic?" Samir asked, also in Arabic, his voice careful, almost reverent. Naomi turned to him with the calm respect Khalid had never offered her. "Yes, sir. Modern Standard Arabic, Gulf dialect, and enough legal phrasing to know when a translation is protecting someone and when it is hiding something." A small breath moved through the table. Not a gasp. Something quieter. Recognition. Khalid leaned forward. "This is inappropriate," he said in English, the language suddenly feeling less like a weapon and more like a shield. "She is staff." Naomi looked at him then. Fully. Directly. For the first time that night. He had no choice but to meet her eyes. "Yes," she said, still in Arabic. "I am staff. I am also the person who heard you say that Mr. Al-Fayed would never catch the control clause until the transfer was complete." The words did not crash. They landed, one by one, heavy as stones placed on glass. Samir reached for Appendix C. His junior counsel moved faster this time, sliding the folder toward him before Martin could cover it with his hand. Martin whispered Khalid's name, a warning dressed as a breath. Khalid ignored him because panic had finally entered the room, and panic is never as disciplined as pride. "She misunderstood," Khalid said. "She is repeating business language she does not understand." Naomi's face did not change. That was what made it worse. She did not look angry. She looked accurate. The phrase in the Arabic version says acceptance is automatic unless written objection is delivered through the Delaware office within 10 business days, she said. The English summary says the fund retains review rights after 18 months. Those are not the same promise. Samir read. His eyes moved once, twice, then stopped. The room waited for his face to decide the truth. When he slowly closed the folder, nobody breathed. Khalid had owned the room 5 minutes earlier. Now every eye in it belonged to Naomi Carter. Samir closed the folder with 2 fingers, slowly, as if the leather itself had become evidence. The sound was soft, almost polite, but it moved through the room like a verdict. Nobody reached for champagne. Nobody cleared a throat. Even the city beyond the glass seemed to dim, all those white and red lights stretching across Washington, District of Columbia, while one table 30 stories above the street tried to pretend it had not just been caught holding a secret. Khalid looked at Samir first, then at Martinvale, then at Naomi, in that order, because pride always searches for a lower place to stand on before it admits the floor is gone. This is a misunderstanding, he said. His voice was controlled, but thinner now. The smoothness had cracked. A service employee overheard a fragment of a legal discussion and made an assumption. Naomi did not answer. She had already said enough to change the temperature of the room. That was the power of truth when spoken cleanly. It did not need to keep proving itself. Samir opened the folder again and pushed it toward his junior counsel. Read the Arabic paragraph aloud, he said. The young attorney hesitated for one heartbeat, then obeyed. His voice shook at first, then steadied as the words filled the room. Each clause became another step away from Khalid. Automatic acceptance. 10 business days. Delaware office. No extended review unless objection was submitted through the specified channel. The young attorney finished and swallowed hard. Samir turned to Martin. Now read the English summary. Martin did not move. His hand rested beside the folder, still and pale under the gold light. That is not necessary, he said. Samir's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes hardened. It is necessary to me. Martin looked at Khalid. Khalid gave him nothing. No nod. No rescue. No escape. So Martin read it, and the difference appeared in the room not as opinion, but as fact. The English version sounded cooperative. The Arabic version sounded like a trap wearing a silk tie. Evelyn Brooks stood by the doorway, her lips pressed together, realizing that the waitress she had nearly asked to disappear had just protected a man with more money than the hotel itself. The analyst who had laughed earlier stared at the table as if the linen had become fascinating. Khalid tried one more time. Legal translations often carry nuance, he said. Naomi finally looked at him again. Nuance is when meaning bends, she said in Arabic. This meaning was buried. Samir leaned back. For the first time all evening, he did not look like a guest. He looked like a man measuring whether betrayal had a signature. Mr. Mercer, he said, switching to English so everyone could understand. I came here to discuss partnership, not surrender. The word partnership seemed to embarrass the table. It hung there, clean and unreachable. Khalid's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. He could not. Power had shifted, and everyone felt it. Not because Naomi had shouted, not because she had demanded respect, because she had revealed the one thing money hates most. A witness it failed to buy. Samir did not tear the agreement. He did something worse for Khalid. He placed it neatly back inside the leather folder and slid it away from himself as if it were no longer worth anger. That small movement ended $900 million before anyone said the words. Martin Vale reached for his pen, then stopped. The analysts looked toward Khalid, waiting for the old version of him to return, the man who could turn pressure into obedience with one cold sentence. But that man was gone, not vanished, revealed. There is a difference. A mask can look like a face until the room finally sees the string behind the ear. Khalid straightened his cuff, buying 1 second, then another. Samir, he said, lowering his voice into the tone he used when he wanted friendship to sound like leverage. Let us step into the private lounge and review this without unnecessary emotion. Samir remained seated. No, he said. 1 syllable. Clean as a locked door. The word reached every corner of the dining room. It reached Evelyn Brooks at the entrance. It reached the busser standing behind the service screen with a stack of plates frozen against his chest. It reached Naomi, who still stood near the side station, hands folded, breathing carefully because courage can look calm from far away while costing everything up close. Khalid's eyes flicked toward her again, not with curiosity now, but with the stunned resentment of a man who had mistaken a human being for furniture and discovered too late that furniture does not remember your crimes. This entire situation has become inappropriate, he said. Because of her. Naomi heard it. Everyone heard it. Samir rose from his chair slowly. He was not tall in a dramatic way, not loud, not theatrical, but the room adjusted around him. No, Mr. Mercer, he said. Because of you. The words did not need volume. Truth rarely does when it has documents beside it. Samir turned to his counsel. Notify our office that the signing is canceled. Preserve every draft, every translation, every message attached to this clause. Martin's face lost color beneath the warm light. One of Khalid's analysts whispered something into his phone, then stopped when he realized 3 people were watching him. Evelyn finally moved, stepping closer to Naomi, not in front of her, not behind her, but beside her. It was late. Too late, maybe. But even late courage has weight. The first phone buzzed on the table. Then another. Then Khalid's. News did not travel yet, but fear did. In rooms like this, fear moved faster than press releases. Somewhere in the hotel, someone had already told security. Somewhere downstairs, a driver was already being called. Somewhere inside Khalid's empire, assistants would soon receive messages with urgent subject lines and no clear explanation. But in that room, the collapse was quiet. No shouting, no spectacle, just a deal dying under gold light, while a black waitress stood exactly where powerful men had told her she did not belong. Samir looked at Naomi and gave a small bow of respect. Miss Carter, he said, you have my thanks. Khalid looked away. That was the first honest thing he had done all night. By the time the private elevator opened, the room had already become 2 different stories. One belonged to the people who had walked in believing money could smooth every corner and seal every mouth. The other belonged to Naomi Carter, who had carried water into a room built to ignore her and walked out as the only person who had protected the truth. Samir Al-Fayed did not leave immediately. He asked for a fresh copy of the Arabic agreement, the English summary, and the translation log. His counsel gathered the documents with careful hands. Martin Vale avoided Naomi's eyes. The analysts packed their tablets without a sound. Khalid stood near the window, framed by the bright lines of Washington far below, looking smaller than a man worth billions was supposed to look. That was the strange thing about pride. It could fill a room for years, then shrink in a second when confronted by someone it had dismissed. Evelyn Brooks approached Naomi with her clipboard pressed against her chest. Naomi, she said softly, and stopped there because apology is hard when it arrives after silence. Naomi looked at her, not cruelly, not warmly, just honestly. I need to check on table 6, she said. It was not defiance. It was dignity. She turned to leave, but Samir called her name. Not waitress, not miss. Her name, Naomi Carter. She paused. He walked toward her with a business card held between 2 fingers. My office needs people who understand language, detail, and pressure, he said. Not for tonight. Not as a reward. Because you are qualified. For the first time all evening, Naomi's calm almost broke. Not into tears. Into memory. A classroom at Howard. Her mother's voice telling her language was a key. Grace asleep in a hospital chair with a blanket around her shoulders. The textbooks she had sold. The dream she had folded away so life would fit inside the space survival left behind. She took the card carefully. Thank you, sir, she said. I will consider it. Across the room, Khalid heard every word. He buttoned his jacket, then unbuttoned it again, a man suddenly unsure what to do with his hands. Finally, he stepped toward her. No audience moved to help him. No attorney whispered the right sentence. No assistant prepared the softer version. Miss Carter, he said, and the title sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. I was disrespectful. Naomi waited. He looked down, then forced himself to look up. And I was wrong. It was not enough. Apologies rarely are when they arrive after damage has already been done. But it was the first truthful sentence he had spoken to her all night. Naomi held Samir's card at her side and answered quietly. Respect should not require translation. No one laughed. No one looked away. Khalid nodded once, because there was nothing else to do when a lesson had already been delivered. Later, when the room was cleared and the roses were taken away and the glasses were washed until no fingerprint remained, the story stayed behind. Not in the documents. Not in the canceled deal. In the silence after one woman spoke the language they thought she could never know. Khalid had the money to own the room, but Naomi had the dignity to change it.